So now we're going to look a little deeper into the Yuga structures. And we're gonna pan out in the timings of the Yugas, where we're covering just the delineations of such the basic delineations of the 4 Yugas. And we're going to understand some smaller yugas, these smaller yugas in place of the grand scheme of things. And you'll see that we have a timing where one Mahayuga is equal to 4.32 million human years, as we saw. And we take this Mahayuga, which we were looking at, and you can place it into another scheme called the Manvantara, which is basically 71 Mahayugas, or 306 million human years, which is quite a staggering number. And so you have to understand that this Manvantara, it shows successive ages of man in different spiritual epochs. And it's thought that during each of these different time periods that the world is considered to be covered or submerged by ice and water, and that there's various what are called manus, or first men, that come and really set the tone for each of these eras. This is, once again, we touched on a bit of this, where we paralleled this with the Sri Yukteswar's incorrectly timing that movement around the Vishnu Nabi, and he had associated that with different, spiritual timings of man, which is really what the Manvantara is doing here within the traditional Vedic settings. And these Manvantaras are a little closer to the real movement around the galactic center, which is actually only 230 million years, so that's about 80% of a total Manvantara. So there's some discrepancy there, but definitely it gives you the idea of that larger timing cycle that's present within this setting, and what the Vedic texts actually say versus Yukteswar's incorrect calculations. Once again, showing that the Vedic rishis were very in line with modern science, as is on a lot of different levels. One of the main ideas to take away from this is that basically everything spins around some type of center, making time, much more cyclical than anything on a larger scale, the more we pan out. Now, if we take these 14 of these Manvantaras, we will get what is only one day in the life of Brahma, which is roughly 4.32 billion years. And so it's during each Manvantara that basically Brahma is seen to create and dissolute the universe. And this isn't really so much on a physical level, from my understanding, but it's due to what's called a lack of Brahma Tejas, in which the sun is considered to lose its creative fire, which is when the world enters basically what's an ice age, and submerged in water, akin to all these creation stories that we have in various traditions, such as in Noah with the Bible, or we see this also in the Vedas, and Manu, which resurrect mankind and establish truth for this era. The Vedas are seen to have been recovered by Matsya, which is basically a fish avatar, which represents this concept very readily. And so it's this reestablishment of truth for this time period, this 14 Manvantaras, which is equal to 1,000 Mahayugas. And this time period, once again, is at 4.32 billion years, and it's very close to the time period of our present-day sun. And it's said that during the day of Brahma, all things are manifest, and during the night, which is another kalpa, which is another roughly 4.32 billion years, all things will return back to Brahma. So we can see that from these time frames, we can really extrapolate that full day of Brahma into 2,000 Mahayugas, or 8.64 billion years. And it's, once again, another time frame that that correlates roughly and pretty closely with a lot of modern physics understandings. From here, we can extrapolate into the months or the years, and then what is called one Mahakalpa, or which is 100 Brahma years, which is really considered the lifetime of Brahma at roughly 311 trillion years, and meaning our galaxy is really only one small time frame to him. Now, within the life of Brahma, really, the universe is dissolved about many times, after which it is completely withdrawn, which is called a Mahapralaya. And then once again, the universe is born anew over and over again. So even if you get, liberated in this existence, the universe, everything happens over and over in a vast cyclical notion of time. So nothing, nothing ever ends. Within these cycles, they go on and on and on. Now, to start to look closer at our own Kali Yuga, it's largely considered that the Kali Yuga really started when Krishna left this earth, and his teachings are said to set basically the message, the tone, and a basic understanding for the Kali Yuga, and show a special importance within this time period. And now Vedic astronomers have said that the Kali Yuga began at midnight on the 23rd of January in the Gregorian calendar, if we extrapolate there, on 3102 BC. Now, one can draw a chart for this for mundane manners, with more worldly manners, which we won't really cover in this course as much as I'm more interested in giving you understanding of the personal reflections of this material. But for those of you studying Jyotish, you can actually look to get deeper into Jyotish in the future. You can actually study, for example, the chart of the opening of the Kali Yuga, which you can see here. Now, to look more at subdivisions of the Yuga time cycles, we can start to understand how there are various ways in which we can divide them in order to see different aspects that are impinging at any one given point in time. My teacher's tradition uses the nakshatra mandala in order to further delineate effects of different time periods. It's just one of the methods they use, and it's information that can't really be found without a proper teacher of these subjects. Now, the method of timing of this really revolves around what's called the Saptarishi nakshatras. And essentially, the Saptarishi are considered the progenitors of mankind, and they're seen as being represented by the 7 stars that comprise what is commonly known as the Big Dipper in the sky. And so basically, as the Saptarishis pass through various nakshatras, they're basically said to bless these nakshatras as they rotate, and they're always rotating around Dhruva, which is the pole star. And you can see here, I've linked the common names to the rishis they're associated with, which we won't get into, but for those of you curious, you can look up these if you want to look into them a little more. But really, this is the real timekeeper, and their movements link with the precession of the equinoxes. So there are various forms of different rishis. However, these are really seen to be the highest and help us to date the yugas effectively. According to Varahamihira, which was a great astrologer of the past, Magha was considered to be the ruling constellation at the start of Kali Yuga. And basically, during the Mahabharata war, the Saptarishi were in Regulus or Leo, and this is really the heart of Leo, the lion. And there's a lot more detailed calculations that I won't get into here because it's a little deeper than this course goes into, but it confirms a lot of these previous calculations we've been giving it as well from another angle within the Vedic text. Now, this movement of the Saptarishis around the pole star is about 960 years per nakshatra. Using this scheme, you can once again break down the yugas into various cycles, which we'll be doing shortly, and you can also predict that the Saptarishis will actually be in Purva Ashada nakshatra when Kali Yuga ends and Kalki avatar comes to Earth. So there's actually, many different descriptions too of when the avatars come and when the yugas actually end and shift within the ancient texts, and gives specific indications of that, which is another backing to why we are not out of the Kali Yuga yet as well, and something else that Yukteswar has not commented or taken into account, nor has a lot of people researched into those ideas seen in the ancient Shastra. Now, in order to use this information, we can extrapolate this into the following schema. And I've given the basic nakshatra mandala chart showing the different nakshatras ruling at the different time periods here per my teacher's tradition. And basically, we'll learn a lot about different timing systems in future lessons as they apply to the personal chart here. But these timing periods are often called dashas, and these are really a time period in which different things can influence with their different energies. So in this scheme, we're understanding the major influences on each time period, and the nakshatras have many different meanings. And knowing some of what a nakshatra represents and that energy, you can start to see how it's impacting different time periods. And we're not going to get so into the we will be getting into a little bit of the meanings of the nakshatras later. I'll try to explain some of them now. But right now I'm trying to give you an idea for how the timing cycles are cut out and working. And as we move a little deeper, you can get some text on the nakshatra. One of my favorites, and the one I found most useful and applicable, while still somewhat approachable, is Prashtrivedi. Has a nice text. If you want to pick that up, that's fine. If not, I'll be giving some indications out of that text and others to understand the nakshatras in our future course lessons. But something to consider if this is an interesting subject for you. Now, from here, we can split up these major time periods given here into various other sub-periods to give more overlapping and more understanding of how the dasha and the timing systems are coming. So the next major step down would be what's called the antar dasha period. And the way you do this is by taking 10 nakshatra in reverse from the Saptarishi nakshatra. With the first 9 is going to give 100 years, and then that 10th nakshatra is going to give us 60 years. So here, if we're looking at the time period that we're currently in, we see that the major time period is ruled over by what's called Mrugashira Nakshatra that started in 1699 is our present day period. And so in order to calculate the Antardashas, the first sub-period is given to that Nakshatra Mrugashira that's ruling the major period. And then you give that 100 years, and then the next 100 years is ruled by the reverse nakshatra, so the nakshatra that comes before Mrugashira within the nakshatra order, which is Rohini, and then you give the next 100 years to the one before that, which is Kritika, and so on and so forth, until that 10th nakshatra makes up the remainder of the years at 60 years to close out that cycle, and you move on to the next major period, which is ruled by Rohini, which is in 2659, which we won't concern ourselves with here too much unless you really want to speculate on what's going to happen in the future. And to get the further sub-period here, the next level down, which is called the Prayantar Dasha, you can break this down in a similar fashion, with each dasha having 10 years and the last antar dasha giving 6 years here to make up that remainder. So this will break down the centuries into smaller sub-periods of roughly a decade. So for example, if we take current epoch, we can take that Bharani Nakshatra period from 1999 to 2089, and notice that once again that first nakshatra is allotted to the first 10 years. The second one is the nakshatra before that, which is Ashwini here, which is 2009 to 2019, and the next one, the next 10 years, is ruled by Revati, which is the nakshatra before Ashwini in your list. So if you're not familiar with the ordering of nakshatras, you can revisit the list we gave in the previous module and become familiar with them, become familiar with the ordering, which will just help your Jyotish study over time. Now, on top of this, people keep refining and refining and refining nakshatra dasha systems all the way down to, even a few hours or minutes, depending on what you're looking at, which can get pretty precise as well as difficult to read. But in this case, you can also take this down into what's called a sukshma dasha. Once again, starting with the first nakshatra, furnishing the first dasha, and covering the next 10 nakshatras in that reverse zodiacal direction, that backwards direction, and each sukshma dasha will show 1 year each in the shift of the energies. And this will give you a good rough idea, a rough timing of what's going on in different time periods and what's coming up. And to do this, you have to start becoming comfortable with the different nakshatras and their energies, and being able to overlay them and understand, what they may be representing and bringing up in different time periods, which you should have some practice with by now from the previous module on individual charts. And so here you can, there's ways to start applying this to more worldly trends. And once again, these results are all known by, the nature of the nakshatra, the devata of the nakshatra, which is a really important piece of the nakshatra, as well as you can also divide each dasha period into padas, much as we did with the Navamsha, where I showed you how you can divide that into different portions. Each nakshatra, as you know, is divided into 4 padas, which gives you the Navamsha periods, but you can understand those padas of the nakshatras that we covered before and see how those are influencing different, more specific time periods within these nakshatra time periods as well. So you can see how we're using that other information here in a different manner and breaking it down even more and overlapping. And there are other ways too to read this that get more specific and a little more confusing, but those basic methods will give you a good start to see these shifts and try to start to understand how they're impacting the world around you and these larger timing cycles. So here we can see that it does get to be quite detailed calculations, and I want to also get into just one quick example to show you how this can be working and get a flavor of how humanity, is shifting in various directions while being subsumed under that, main energy of the Kali Yuga. For example, just looking at the nature of each nakshatra will give us a lot of information. So as we said before, our current time period, just to look at where we're at, is ruled over by Mrugashira, which is a very searching nakshatra, and it's always looking to get into everything, and is a very curious nakshatra, and ruled over by the planet Mars, which is a very Mars rules over engineering and logical prowess, and Mars is, a ruler over the Earth plane, the Earth Bhumi, as we covered with B.K.S. Iyengar's chart. And so we see the shift in 1699 coming, which is when the Industrial Revolution really started to pick up gear, and we can see how that's been influencing this whole time period very heavily, bringing in all those concerns that Mrugashira represents. Also, it's interesting to note that those with a prominent and more negative moon, when it's placed in Mrigashira on a personal level, it can also bring a lot of mental and nervous exhaustion, which is something that we can see coming as a result of the Industrial Revolution, how people eventually turned away from more hard physical labor and into one of more kind of mental work, computers and things of this nature, which has led to a lot of Vata disturbances in the modern age. And so this is just a basic idea of the general energies that it really kicked up around 1699. If we look a little deeper into the Yantadashar, we can see that it's currently subsumed under Bharani Nakshatra. And Bharani is it's a very reactionary energy, and it seeks to bring two extremes, two opposites together in some fashion, often giving birth to something new. But it's the very extreme nakshatra in many ways, and so it's quite a volatile energy. It's ruled over by Venus, who's a teacher of worldly knowledge. So it's this very violent, explosive energy, and we can see it fomenting here in these current times. Before we can see 99 really is a big turning point. For example, 1999 is a big turning point in the evolution of the internet. And this is really when people started really harnessing its power, as well as a lot of new technologies in producing product placements and this extremity of capitalism and individualism that we had never known before come of age. So if you study the shifts in corporate ideology and how marketing and self-care, if you watch the video which I had recommended in the previous course, Century of Self, how marketers were increasingly looking to engender markets of self-expression through products. 99 was a big turning point within this. While it was fomenting before, that double influence of Barney really, I think, kicked it into high gear. And we can also see in these times that there's a great phenomenon where those in power with the common man, a knowledge of those who have the majority of what in the world who are calling the shots, really came to a forefront during these times of IRES, calling to those ideas of two opposite sides of the poles of existence that grew increasingly during this period. That whole concept of the 99 to the 1%, where the 1% has it all and 99% has nothing. So you see that extremity growing more and more, that class struggle, that middle class kind of disappearing during this time period more and more, until we come to 2009, where we see that we entered into a sub-period of Ashwini, which is the celestial healers. The Ashwini Kumaras is what this is named after, which you can look up in the mythology if you want to learn more. So it's interesting that during this time, we see a growing concern for the environment, as well as what we've done in this era that really began back in 1699 with the Industrial Revolution. That has led to this era where we've completely pillaged the earth, and these healing energies are now coming into the forefront as of 2009. With the sustainability movement, awareness of global warming, our dwindling resources. We're really taking a step back from those extremities of the previous decades, primarily especially that growth in the previous decade from 99 to 2009, and that just rapid expansion of individualized product and throwaway consumer society, which really reached the limit. And we're still in it, no doubt, but people are starting to question it, are starting to understand and trying to come away from it. which is bringing in, and you see this too with all this, these healing modalities becoming more and more popular, alternative healing, yoga, meditation, all this, once again, it was fomenting before, but after 2009, it just went off the board. And I've watched this chain too. And while this is good in one respect and trying to tip the balance of the world in another way, as we brought up before when we talked about the Kali Yuga, it's still subsumed within that larger structure of the Kali Yuga. Because there's a lot of misinformation out there these days regarding healing modalities and healing practices. You go on the internet, sure, you can find tons of information, but good luck trying to find some quality information these days. It's very hard to do, let alone get to the depth of some of the Vedic sciences. So this is just the basic shifts, but hopefully that's enough to help you understand how it's working. And the more you look into the nakshatras, and it's an interesting study if you get into history to see how it's being informed by these different time periods. And for now, I'm just trying to show you kind of the tools how to get there and an appreciation for where we're at. Now, the nakshatra system is just one way to look at all these different epochs, and we can get even more information by looking at other ways to cut up the yugas basically into sub-periods. And one of these is what's called samvatsara years. And this term samvatsara, it has many different meanings depending on how it's applied and what you're looking at. So you may come across different things if you research into it. But the one we're concerned here is what's also termed as Jovian years, as Jupiter generally takes about 1 solar year to transit a sign, which has pretty important significations. So as such, it takes Jupiter about 12 years to cover the whole zodiac, while Saturn will cover the whole zodiac in about roughly 30 years. And so these numbers, the 12 with Jupiter is linked to the sun, since the sun creates those 12 rashis, and then the Saturn can be linked to the moon because it covers the whole nakshatra mandala within roughly a month. So every 20 years, Saturn and Jupiter conjoin, and then every 60 years, they'll actually return to the same element they were in 60 years prior. And these are important conjunctions. This 60-year conjunction is the basic samvatsara cycle based on Jupiter. And each year in this 60-year cycle is given its own name and has its own meaning and peculiar effects as well. Now, along with the nodes, Saturn and Jupiter transits are critical turning points, both for larger scale events as well as when you look at your personal chart. And so when you're looking at transits in your personal chart, these transits should be watched, as these two planets, as well as the nodes, are some of the slowest moving things in the chart, which we'll look at in another section about transits and your personal chart. However, in this larger context, you can see, the 60-year cycles in the Jovian years. And I'm not going to get into what each of these years mean, but if you want, you can look up the names of these and research what they're meaning, what they're coming, and if you want, you can try to apply that to history as well. It's a daunting study, but if you choose to take it, good for you, and let me know how let me know what you come up with. But here you can also see that each roughly 20-year cycle in which Jupiter and Saturn are conjunct, it gives us a predominant guna that is at work, which is either sattva, rajas, or tamas. So one of those gunas is seen to be predominant within one of these 20-year cycles, which once again we can place that over our knowledge of the nakshatra mandala, over the Kali Yuga, to see all these various energies shifting at work. Now, in order to find out what Jovian year it is, we can do a few different methods. The easiest way to do this is you can start with the Gregorian calendar, and you add 56 years and 8.5 months to it, approximately. And the simple method to do that is to add 57 years as a simple method, which can get tricky, but if you want to be a little more precise, 56 years and 8.5 months to that Gregorian calendar. And then from this number, you minus 3. Once you get that number, you want to take the year and divide it by 60. And once you have that number, you just take only the decimal portion of that number. So if you get, 21.3468, whatever, you take that 0.3468, that decimal portion of the number, multiply it by 60, and then you're going to get a number. Now, that number will correspond to the Jovian year here, which I've listed. So, if 21, you look up in the 21 list, and it'll come up in the middle column, for example. And once again, you can research what that specific year is, but for here, we're just looking at whether it's Sattva, Rajas, or Tamas that's being predominant to give us a good rough idea of a larger time scale. And if you do end up calculating this stuff, you should hopefully find out that for the period between 1927 to 1987, this included a 20-year period of Rajas from 1927 to 1947, a period of Sattva, of sustainability, from 1947 to 1967, which was, after the World Wars, the whole hippie movement, all that started happening. And then a period of Tamas, which was from 1967 to 1987. And we're once again entering into a period of Rajas after 1987. And so I'm not going to get into applying this so much. That's going to be part of some later questions for you, but hopefully it makes sense on how to calculate that and how to extrapolate that, and you can look into different historical movements, time periods, and see how that energy is playing out within those time periods. We can also look further to see some of the details of when those Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions take place, as well as the other transits in a structure scheme and forming events. So by looking where, what sign Jupiter and Saturn are in when these conjunctions are happening or when they're moving through, the different time periods, it's going to give you even more information for how that's shifting and shaping not only worldly events once again, but also if you look to your personal chart for those transits, it'll give up some more information. Now, to understand these movements a little more specifically, those movements are pretty general, but each of these 20-year conjunctions occurs about 123 degrees apart. And so this is basically a ninth house movement from the previous conjunction. And, ninth house has to do with great learning and teachers, things of that nature. While every 60 years, it returns to the same sign. So there's, certain reflective quality going on there when anything returns to the same sign of what has come before it. It completes a cycle. Now, there's also retrograde conjunctions that happen through this time period that will have effects as well, not necessarily as strongly, but they're also irregular motions due to discrepancies, and all this has to be taken into account, which makes it quite a detailed study that we won't get into, but I want you to just appreciate that I've provided a chart here so you can see how some of these movements occur. So for example, you can see how from 1941, 1961, and then in 1980, we have fairly straight motion. And then after that 1980, you see in 1981, there was a conjunction through a retrograde in Libra again. And then once the planet started moving forward again, there was another conjunction later there in July of 1981 as well. And basically when Jupiter and Saturn return to the same sign after 60 years, they have advanced about 9 degrees within that sign. And, this keeps those So as they keep returning to the same sign, they're moving forward in that sign, so that eventually when they keep returning, they will move out of that sign as well, which keeps the pattern kind of moving forward through the zodiac in a different manner. And the conjunction will stay basically in the same element for about 200 years until it enters the next element. And these every 200 years, when the element changes, great kind of big changes can occur, in the world, particularly at Gandanta points. And then every 800 years is another big cycle once again, which is roughly 40 conjunctions that happens. And this happens within almost 1 degree, a little under 1 degree of its starting point. And the conjunctions have completely gone through the zodiac within those 800 years, not quite returning to the starting point. And then another larger cycle is 2,400 years, where these conjunctions, they form actually triangles, and the triangle has made a complete turn through the chart. And now that 1 degree discrepancy I talked about before makes even a larger cycle, where the planets, where Jupiter and Saturn come to an exact return at 288,000 years. And that nice number can actually get correlated into the Sat Yuga, where there's 6 of these exact conjunctions in the Sat Yuga. There's 4.5 in Treta, 3 in Dwarpa, and in Kali there's 1.5 of these, which gives about 15 of these grand 288,000 year cycles in one Mahayugas. So it does connect back to that whole Mahayuga theory. So I know this is a lot of math and a lot of numbers to throw at you, but once again, don't worry about some of these specifics. But I'm just trying to give you an appreciation for how all these numbers link into each other, and some of the complications that arise, and as well the depth to a lot of this Vedic thinking. And the uses of some of those smaller cycles of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions, a 20-year cycle, as we were talking about, can be used for more shorter-term historical events, with the first 10 being ruled by Jupiter, second 10 of the 20-year cycles ruled mainly by Saturn and its effects. If you look to those 60-year cycles, that can be used for politics and larger economic shifts occurring. And then every 200 years can be used to look at governments or dynasties undergoing major changes and fallings. And then every 800 years can be seen in the rise and falls of whole civilizations, or major changes in civilizations. And predictions are often made for each cycle according to basically the exact time of the conjunction, and this will give different results depending on different parts of the world, because the lagna, the chart, can be drawn for what's ascending at the specific point of the world during that specific conjunction over the whole globe. So it'll show, different results for different parts of the world, and taking that into account with, a country's birth chart as well. So a lot of this stuff gets very complex and deeper Jyotish, but once again, I'm giving you an appreciation for how that works. Now, to bring this information back to the yugas and break it down in yet one more cycle, just to drive you mad a little maybe, but we can use these same Sattvasara years in conjunction with the yugas. So a 5-year cycle with the Jovian years is one Samvatsara Yuga, and each year in one of these Samvatsara Yugas has a specific name, once again with different qualities, which we won't get into here. But this 5-year division basically gives 60-month cycles within the 60-year time period, or 12 groups of 5, which correlates also as well with the Chinese calendar. So you can see other elements of other traditions being brought up within the Vedic system here as well. Just a little side note there. And we can break this down, and you can see on the chart how the 5 years turns into 10 years. And then we can turn this into 120 years, which is one chakra, which is called Manusya Purna Ayus, which is basically the maximum age of people living in this time period. And then we can see 10 chakra. Now, here's where we can start to take those Yuga calculations of 4 divisions, 3 divisions, 2 divisions, 1 division, which gives us those 10 chakras, which gives us 1,200 years, which is 1 Maha chakra. And then once again, you can add those, turn those into another 10 division of the 4 and the 3 and the 2 and the 1, which correlate to the Satya, Treta, Dwapara, and Kali Yugas, also inhibiting or also expressing their energies within those subdivisions in a 12,000 year span, which is 1 Svarga chakra. And then when we see the Svarga chakra, that gives us 3 units, which we can break up into the Rajas, the Sattva, and the Tamas, giving predominant of those energies over a larger period of time of 12,000 years each, which gives 1 Aditya. And then we can place that into that larger scheme of 12 adityas, which is the 12 months historically in the Vedic. In the Vedic system, each month or each sign is ruled over by aditya, which is this 36,000 years, and you take that, multiply it by 12, which gives us the 432,000 years, which is 1 yuga. Once again, if you go back to our original calculations of the Yuga theory. So you can see how detailed this gets into with the different energies. And so based on this, if Kali Yuga basically started in 3102, then the first period would run until 32,898 AD, if we're just looking at the adityas. So that's the first 36,000 year period here, starting there at that largest period. And the first aditya in this scheme is associated with the sign Aries, showing a larger concern. And once again, there's that emphasis of the Mars energy coming up in this time period, and it has a lot of associations as well, like we talked about with Mrugashirsh before in that Nakshatra Mandala. Aries, you should know some of the energy of Aries, that is the predominant sign energy being translated here in this first epoch of this Kali Yuga. And as we worked forward, we're now working backwards, and you can break down that 36,000 year period, that aditya, into the Rajas, Sattva, and Tamas energy of a different 12,000 year period. So that means that Rajas energy dominates from 3102 BC, the start of the Kali Yuga, until 8898 AD, which is a large period, which we won't see the end of. And then Sattva will dominate until 20,898 AD, and Tamas until 32,898 AD. So today, once again, there's strong Aries, there's strong Rajas within this major time period. It's still a time period of great energy and forward thinking, and lots of change, lots of movement. Which will, in 8898, shift to that sattvic energy, so a sustainable energy. So who knows, basically, but not all doom and gloom, hopefully. Now, we can take one step further back into the subdivisions and divide this Rajas period, this 12,000 year period, into 10 parts each, having the 1,200 years. Once again, this is according to the Yugas. So we can say there's a a Satya or Krita Mahachakra of 4,800 years between 3102 BC to 1698 AD, a Treta Mahachakra of 3,600 years from 1698 to 5290 AD, which is the time period we're in right now, and so on and so forth that we've listed. Along with this, there are junction periods of the above, which we've given before within our systems, which you can look at if you want. So there's a 400-year junction for the Krita Mahachakra, 300 years for Treta, 200 for Dwarpa, and 100 for the Kali in these subdivisions. And so here you can once again see 1698, which is very close to that Industrial Revolution turning point with the Mrugashirsh Nakshatra coming as a dual influence, a very drastic changing. And this is really the Sandhi, the transitional point for the Treta Mahachakra, which is 300 years. And that transition point was occurring between 1698 up until very recently, up until 1998. We saw, the Industrial Revolution coming to the forefront. And once again, 1998, showing that double influence of the Bharani Nakshatra overlapping, which obviously was a great time, a transitional time into, a lower subperiod, if you will, of Treta Mahachakra. And we could also fine-tune this years backwards, just the same to some Samvatsara years, which is what we did previously. And so all these different energies are overlapping at the same time. And while we're saying, Krita, Satya, Mahachakra, Treta Mahachakra, these are subdivisions of the Yuga. So the main Yuga is the Kali Yuga. And even though it was a Sat Yuga, that was, a quote-unquote decent time within the Kali Yuga. And here we see a stepping down of the energy so prevalent in the Industrial Revolution, still subsumed under the Kali energy once again. And so in this way, we see a confluence, just to go through all the timing systems we've covered, a confluence of nakshatras, of the rashis, of the yugas, of Jupiter and Saturn conjunctions, of Mahaguna energy, all of these things overlapping to help us define, understand, find our place with what's happening on the planet during this time period within the Kali Yuga. So this is the nature of Jyotish, and while this may seem overwhelming or confusing, perhaps to beginners, it's really only the beginning of Jyotish. I've tried to keep it actually quite simple, rudimentary, but I'm just hoping to give an appreciation for the complexity of some of these timing systems. And I know I've moved through it quickly. But go back, look at the charts, look at the timing systems, and try to get a feel for how they're working and how they're constructed here. And there's even, once again, like I said, there's further calculations. But this is the basic gist of the different timing systems. I hope this has been helpful. And if you have any questions on these, please post. I'll try to answer it best I can. And good luck and be well.